You know how people say all the time, like, why are guys so obsessed with starting podcasts? Like, why does every dude have to have a podcast? I don't know. That's not this for now. Maybe it turns into something. I'm just bored, 4 o'clock Wednesday afternoon, having coffee, because why not? This is life working in local TV when you're a weekend guy, okay? Look, it's all fun. We're going to make it fun. We're going to talk about what's going down in the sports landscape in the Peach State right now, particularly with some college football. That's going to be the heavy focus on what has happened already, what we're going to see this weekend, and kind of expand beyond that, given the information that we have. So, look, we're starting with Georgia Tech. Yes, they played first, but we understand that Georgia Tech, typically in this state, is second fiddle. It's just how it's always been. But they deserve to be the headliner for what they did. Now, is that a program-defining win? Maybe. Maybe. It could turn into something. Could turn into a springboard. Could turn into a huge resume win. Whatever Florida State does could benefit from that. Who knows? All we know right now is it's a really, really good statement win to start the season, and maybe alters our expectations of what Georgia Tech can be. Brent Key had a fascinating press conference on Tuesday. It was about 15 minutes. I was there. His opening statement seemed like it was about a third of the entire press conference. And I have immense respect for how Brent Key handled everything after that game and so far going into game week. So we know the mindset that so many coaches like to hammer out, specifically with the media. Okay, 1-0, each week's our Super Bowl. And that's true. Like, it's cliche, but it's true. When you're dealing with teenagers and kids in their 20s with all the distraction and everything, it's so hard to get them hyper-focused on the goal week in and week out when there's all this external noise. And this has been a thing for so many years, but now it's just heightened. TV contracts with NIL, social media, with everything like that. We're going to emphasize so many big games. Like, we talked about Georgia Tech, Florida State, and now we're already talking about Georgia Tech, Notre Dame. That's weeks away, over a month away. We're not talking about Georgia State. We're talking about Georgia getting ready to play Clemson this weekend. And then we're talking about, okay, then they got this, and then they go to Alabama at the end of the month. We're not talking about the 2 games in between. Then we're talking about when they go to Texas. No mention of Auburn and Mississippi State in between there. So if we're saying it, kids are going to hear it, and coaches want to block that out because they already have enough distraction between school, football, family, social life, everything, social media, NIL. Like, so trying to keep them focused on one goal and stay in the present to help their future is really, really difficult to do. Great programs master it. It sometimes doesn't work, year in and year out. You see teams lay eggs, have letdowns, and get upset. It's college football. It's going to happen. Brent Key, when he handled that press conference, said it perfectly. For this program, when I came in, there was 3 phases. We had to learn how to lose. We had to learn how to win. We have to learn to win consistently. And that's where they're at now. So they won games last year. They were a tough team to beat. They had some bad losses. Like, they lost to Bowling Green at home. I think Boston College as well. They were close in a couple games. Like, the Miami game should have been a loss, but they kept playing. It happened. I thought they should have beat Louisville week 1. They had a terrible second half. But that's college football. Like, you're not going to be perfect week in and week out. But, like, this is the tough test now for Georgia Tech. You just beat Florida State, who's a really good program, a program under Mike Norvell so far in this recruiting cycle and with the talent that he's amassed that has ascended to last year's undefeated regular season, and now seems like, okay, is it going to tip with these 2 games? Who knows? Like, the question with Mike Norvell now, was he good for that team? Is he great at building a program? And can he sustain it? We're going to see. So with Georgia Tech, it's a really good win. Now they're going to go play Georgia State, and everyone's going to say they should blow them out. I don't know if they're going to blow them out, but they should win. That's going to be the challenge. Everyone's talking about Georgia Tech being this darling. Okay, you got the win. We're excited. It looked good. You dominated the line of scrimmage. Like, you did everything you wanted to do. You wrote so many wrongs from last year. Your run D wildly improved of what we've seen in week 1 against Florida State. Haynes King had 16 interceptions last year. Took care of the ball. Almost had a couple of disasters with fumbles. They were able to salvage those. So, like, they did what they needed to do for that game. Can they do that against Georgia State? Can they not have a letdown? I think Georgia Tech's going to be win. It would definitely be an upset if Georgia State won that game, sure. But how Georgia Tech looks is going to be everything. They don't have to go out and win 60-0. But if they win by 2 or 3 scores and look comfortable, well, I should say probably 3 scores, and they look comfortable doing it, and they're playing their brand of football, then you got something here. So with Georgia Tech, too, we're talking all about the week-to-week and how improved they are as a program. And it seems to be on an upswing. And it's true. But they also could be that and still go 6-6. Like, that schedule is absolutely brutal. We're looking at, the teams and the brands and the names they get in October and November between Notre Dame at the Benz, Georgia, Miami, Virginia Tech supposed to be wildly improved. Like, this is a kind of a tricky slate early on because you don't know what you're going to get. Yeah, they beat Florida State, which out of their first 5 games is probably going to be their toughest challenge, and they did it in a neutral site in Europe. So credit to you on that. You play Georgia State this weekend. Then you go to Syracuse. That's weird. That's like you don't know what Syracuse is going to be early in that season. Then you go to VMI, and then it's at Louisville. Louisville was very well coached last year and surpassed so many expectations that we had for them in year 1 of Jeff Brom. Is that a get-back game for Georgia Tech? Is that one they can win? Do they have the maturation enough to go into a place that is well coached and win that game? Maybe. You hope so. If they don't start 5-0, that doesn't mean this season's a disappointment. You would think that they can start 4-1, have enough momentum, and manage the rest of the season. Because you'll have Miami late in the year, NC State, at Georgia on a Friday night on Black Friday. Virginia Tech, like I said, North Carolina and Duke in back-to-back weeks with, Manny Diaz, Mac Brown. There's really good teams here that they're going to have to face. So if they go 6-6, is that a disappointment based off one game? We don't know. I think they could probably win 7 or 8 games. I think they're maybe even more than that. They're a team that we're talking about in the playoff. We haven't seen anything else from these ACC teams yet outside of Georgia Tech and Florida State. So all we have to go on is the information we have right now. And I'm basing a lot of this of, I don't know what they can be. 6 wins, 10 wins, whatever, based on just reputation and what we've seen from these other programs, ascending, rebuilding, adding pieces. We don't know. All of those could nosedives. All of them can be wildly improved, and it's a much tougher test, much tougher road to travel for Georgia Tech. So we'll see. But a great week 1 win. Nothing more, nothing less than that. And Brent Key has hammered home to his guys about just staying in the moment. This is their Super Bowl this week. Yes, it's Georgia State's because it's, you get the in-town game, the city game, a chance to prove yourself. With Dell McGee coming over from Georgia, having Jim Chaney, guy that was a very successful offensive coordinator at Georgia. This is going to be big for Georgia State. And it's big for Atlanta. This is not a cupcake game for Georgia Tech. This is a celebration game for Atlanta. It's going to be awesome to see. I'll be there on Saturday night. But, Georgia Tech, it's about one game to the next. Because as, much momentum was built in 2023 with Brent Key. It was what you expect. Peaks and valleys. A lot of ups and downs week in and week out. So that's going to be a test for them, how they're able to maintain that. And that's something that Georgia had to deal with early in the Kirby Smart era, navigating the week-to-week. They were wildly successful at it out of the gate. But they've had their, letdowns or their slow starts against inferior opponents. Can't do that this week. I love this matchup to start the season for Georgia and for Clemson. Because anytime you talk about this matchup, you get shades of the last time they played and where those programs were at that time, where they've gone since that matchup in 2021. So going to that point, Clemson was the elite program. 6-year window, playing the title game 4 times, won 2 championships. They had this assembly line of a great quarterback play going from Taj Boyd, building up to Deshaun Watson, then the exchange of Trevor Lawrence, who maintained the success there. And then DJ Uiagalelei comes in at the time, another 5-star recruit, and we're thinking, okay, another seamless pass of the baton. And it wasn't that. And Clemson, who was 3rd at the time that game was played, Georgia was 5th. They were able to flip roles. Georgia was the team that was trying to get there, that had been banging on the ceiling, going to New Year's Six bowl games, not being able to get past and Alabama and LSU, whomever it may be. They took that step that season, and maybe we put more stock into that game than we needed to, but a lot of people thought that was kind of a changing of a guard moment for Georgia. Now, they were able to ride that wave the rest of the season with a dominant defense. It was an awful first game to watch. I mean, you can love defense all you want, but it just wasn't a fun game to watch, aesthetically pleasing from an offensive side. It just wasn't. But that's what you have to do in week one games. Just find ways to win. They're not all going to be masterpieces. We can judge performances more critically at the end of the year. But when you haven't played in months, you've been practicing against each other, yeah, expect slow starts. But I love this matchup now because is Clemson still Clemson enough to win this game? I think that's a question. This is still a really good program, well coached under Dabo. And look, the guy's taking some shots for not wanting anything to do with the transfer portal. He has moments at the microphone. Like, we expect that from Dabo. It's still a 9-10 win program. Still a 9-10 win program. They weren't, last year was not what they wanted at all. But they know their system really well. And I'd asked Kirby Smart about that, given that this is one of the programs, similar to Georgia, that doesn't invest as much in the transfer portal. Now, Clemson's completely different. Georgia will add pieces here and there, but both of those programs largely are talent acquisition from the high school level first and developing internally. So there's a lot of mutual respect. And Kirby Smart said, yes, it might not be new pieces coming in, but these are guys that know their system, that are familiar with it, that have mastered it over the last couple of years. So that is a challenge in itself. And that's complementary to Clemson. But just the big question with them is going to be, do they have the athletes on the outside that can burn Georgia, that can make life difficult for them? Cade Klubnik's a good quarterback. Big-time recruit out of Texas a couple of years ago, was able to take over for DJU. And he had a good season last year. Statistically, they have a really good running back in Phil Maffa. This Georgia defense has gone through some changes, introducing some new starters here and there. Georgia's the better team. There's a reason they're a 2-score favorite. They should win this game. But can Clemson muddy the water enough for them? Defensively, they have one of the best players in the country on either side of the ball in Barrett Carter. I would expect this game to be under 30, in terms of whoever wins. I think Georgia, for me, there are questions with the offense in terms of kind of like Clemson. Last year as you were introducing a new quarterback in Carson Beck, you had the safety valve, the ultimate weapon in college football in Brock Bowers. I mean, you can argue for a 3-year stretch, there was no more valued skill position player in the game than Brock. Again, you can argue it. There are other guys that certainly come into the mix, but just a guy that you could rely on week in and week out. This Georgia team doesn't have a Brock. They don't have a Ladd McConkey. What does give confidence to Carson Beck is not just the starts, but how he was able to perform last year when Brock was out, when Ladd McConkey was out, really able to develop a lot of chemistry with supplemental pieces in that receiving core, in that tight end room. Oscar Delp comes to mind, who's expected to take a step forward this year. Marcus Rosemy-Jackson last year, Ra Thomas, those guys are no longer with the team in that receiver room. So you go, okay, can they develop it enough early on in that game between a Colby Young, who's dealt with a hamstring injury, a Dylan Bell, who's a guy that played everywhere on that offense last year. We saw him get reps in the backfield. He's kind of that ultimate Swiss Army knife too. And then you're introducing guys like London Humphreys transfer from Vanderbilt. You have other pieces like, I'm trying to think, Dominic Lovett, a guy that's expected to be their one. So there's a lot of good pieces on this offense. Do they develop that chemistry quickly enough, in a game against a team with a really good defense? I don't know. I don't think Georgia's going to go in there. This isn't going to be Oregon in 2022, where all those pieces were coming back from the year before. You had so much talent, so much chemistry. This is a very talented Georgia team, don't get me wrong. But I don't think this is one that's going to come in and put up 49 points. I think Georgia might score more than 30, but I can see this game, being under that. It's week one. Clemson's a very good defense. They're a program that knows what their identity is. I still expect Georgia to win this game, but this isn't going to be one of those where if Georgia doesn't blow them out, which has become kind of expectation with this program when you look at these non-conference games over the past couple of years, from what they've done with Michigan in the Orange Bowl a few years ago, Florida State last year. They have Oregon, in 2022 that I just mentioned. and they put it on these teams. The only one that really didn't was Ohio State in the Peach Bowl a couple years ago in the semifinal. So Georgia's going to win this game. It's going to be a question of how much, but really we're not going to know anything about this Georgia team until we get more into the meat of their schedule. We expect them to perform well. I believe they will. But when you're on top, the margin for error critically is so thin. Any little thing you do wrong, people are going to knock you down. The only thing that matters is just win the game week 1 and then win the game week 2. And we'll start talking about aesthetics and how teams look and all that stuff when we really get into October. That's how things work. But right now, you stockpile your wins, you build your chemistry. It's a great challenge week 1 for both of these. Well, I should say for Georgia. Again, I don't know if they'll cover. I really don't. But I think they're going to win this game straight up. So we'll see with that. And then Georgia Tech, it's their Super Bowl because it's the next game of their schedule. Georgia's really mastered how to win, week in and week out to prepare for different opponents. Some of that you can say is just they're just more talented than everyone else. They understand what they have to do, and you just can't match up with that. But that's also coaching. That's recruiting. That's player development. That's a lot of things going into that to why they're able to do that. Georgia Tech's nowhere close to that. So it's just interesting to see the dynamic of both those programs as it develops and continues on both sides. So it's been fascinating to watch. So that's all I got so far for right now. We'll dig into this next week. We'll dig into it whenever you want. It's college football. It's back.